The great crystal halls of Zentara Prime sparkled with light from 12 different suns as the Galactic Council gathered for what many hoped would be their final discussion about humanity. Speaker Vexthara stood at the center of the massive chamber, her crystalline form catching and splitting the light into rainbow patterns across the walls. Around her, representatives from 12 advanced civilizations waited in their designated areas, each species as different from the others, as Fire from Ice. Jake Morrison sat alone in the human section, a small area that seemed almost forgotten. In the corner of the vast space, he wore the simple blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, looking plain and unremarkable compared to the exotic forms around him. The Corvani delegate glowed with internal energy that made the air shimmer. The Zentari representatives looked like living diamonds. The insectoid hive queen chittered softly to herself, her compound eyes reflecting 1,000 tiny images of the chamber. For 300 years, humanity had lived under council protection. They called it protection, but Jake knew better. It was control. Humans could only settle on worlds the council approved. They could only trade with species the council allowed. They could only develop technologies the council deemed safe. Every human colony, every human ship, every human discovery had to be approved by these beings who saw his people as dangerous children, who might hurt themselves with sharp objects. The vote had been building for decades. More and more council. Species complained about human unpredictability. Humans asked too many questions. They explored places they should not go. They made friends with species the council preferred to keep separate. They invented things in ways that made no sense to civilized minds. Worst of all, they refused to accept simple answers when told something was impossible. Speaker Vexthara raised one crystal arm, and the chamber fell silent. Her voice rang out like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, translated instantly into every language present. The Council recognizes the long debate regarding the human species and their continued inclusion in our protected territories. The time has come for a final decision. Jake felt his heart beating faster, but kept his face calm. He had known this day would come. The signs had been there for months. Fewer invitations to council meetings, delayed responses to human requests, trade agreements that somehow never got finalized. The other species had been preparing for this moment, and now it was here. The Corvani delegate spoke first, his words crackling with barely contained energy. Humans have proven themselves unable to follow simple guidelines. Their exploration of the forbidden zones threatens the stability we have maintained for millennia. They corrupt other species with their chaotic thinking. The Hive Queen agreed with a series of rapid clicks. The collective consciousness finds human individuality disturbing. They resist proper integration into galactic civilization. Their violent history speaks to a fundamental flaw in their nature. One by one, each species presented their arguments. The humans were too aggressive, too curious, too willing to take risks that endangered everyone around them. They refused to accept the wisdom of their betters. They insisted on learning things the hard way instead of simply following established protocols. Jake listened to it all without speaking. The council had not asked for his input, and he knew better than to offer it unbidden. These beings had made their decision long before today's meeting. This was just the formal ceremony to make it official. Finally, Speaker Vexthara called for the vote. All in favor of removing humanity from council protection and requiring their departure from all territories under our jurisdiction. 12. Lights appeared in the air above the chamber, one for each species. Jake watched as one by one each light turned from white to red. The Corvani voted first, followed quickly by the Centauri. The insectoid hive voted with a sharp click of approval. Even the usually neutral observers cast their vote for removal. When the last light turned red, Speaker Vexthara nodded with satisfaction. The vote is unanimous. Humanity is hereby expelled from Council protection. They have 180 standard days to evacuate all territories under Council jurisdiction. Jake stood slowly, his legs steady despite the earthquake this decision would cause across human space. I understand. We will comply with the Council's decision. Speaker Vexthara seemed surprised by his calm response. Perhaps she had expected anger or pleading. You may speak if you wish to address the Council before you leave. Jake looked around the chamber at the 12 species who had just cast his people into the unknown. I thank the Council for the protection they have provided humanity these past 3 centuries. We will remember your guidance as we make our own way in the galaxy. He turned and walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the suddenly quiet chamber. Behind him, he heard the whispered conversations beginning. The Council members were already discussing how to divide up the territories and resources. Humanity would leave behind the transport ship that carried Jake back to human space. Was small and unremarkable, just like everything else humanity was allowed to have under Council rule. But as Jake sat in the tiny passenger compartment, he was not thinking about what humanity was losing. He was thinking about what they might become when they were finally free to find out Dr. Lisa. Kane met him at the spaceport on New Geneva, humanity's administrative center in Council space. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and graying hair who had spent her career studying alien biology under Council restrictions. How bad is it? She asked as they walked through the crowded terminal. Complete expulsion. 6 months to evacuate everything. Jake handed her the official notice, a crystalline data cube that felt cold against her palm. Lisa read through the formal language with growing amazement. They are actually doing it. After all these years of threats, they are really throwing. You is out. Commander Ryan Hayes joined them at the transport pad, his military bearing obvious even in civilian clothes. The Council had never allowed humans to maintain a proper military, only small security forces for police work and minor emergencies. The evacuation fleet is already being assembled, he reported. Every ship we can buy, build, or borrow. It will not be pretty, but we can move everyone. Jake nodded. Where will we go? The Kepler Expanse, Ryan replied. It is the only region large enough to hold our population that the Council does not claim. They consider it too dangerous and resource poor to be worth their attention. Lisa laughed, but there was no humor in it. Too dangerous for the Council means it might actually be interesting for us. As their transport lifted off from New Geneva, Jake looked down at the human settlements scattered across the planet's surface. Tomorrow, the news would spread across human space like wildfire. There would be panic at first, then anger, then the grim determination that had carried humanity through every crisis in their history. The Council thought they were solving a problem by getting rid of the troublesome humans. They believed humanity would either die quietly in the outer rim, or become irrelevant scavengers picking through the galaxy's leftovers. They had no idea they were about to discover what humans could become when they stopped trying to fit into someone else's idea of civilization. In 6 months, the last human ship would leave Council space. What happened after that would surprise everyone, including humanity itself. Captain Alex Carter stood on the bridge of the UHS Liberty, watching the largest fleet in human history prepare for departure. Through the viewscreen, he could see hundreds of ships stretching out into the darkness of space like a river of lights. Cargo haulers that had been hastily converted into passenger ships. Mining vessels loaded with families instead of ore. Military transports carrying entire communities in their cargo bays. The evacuation fleet was a patchwork of hope and desperation, held together by human stubbornness and the refusal to simply give up. 6 months had passed since the Council's decision, and every human settlement in Council space was now empty. 12 billion people had packed their lives into whatever containers they could find and loaded themselves onto ships that were never designed to carry so many. The Liberty itself was an old cargo vessel that Alex had commanded for 15 years, now modified with life support systems that pushed every safety margin to its limit. Dr. Elena Rodriguez moved through the crowded corridors of the Liberty, checking on the families crammed into every available space. She was humanity's leading expert on alien biology, though the Council had never allowed her to study anything truly interesting. Now, as she helped a young mother calm her crying baby, she wondered what new forms of life they might encounter. In the Outer Rim, a journey to the Kepler Expanse would take 3 months, assuming their hastily assembled fleet could hold together that long. Alana had been studying the limited data available about their destination, and what she found both worried and excited her. The region was considered uninhabitable by Council standards because of its unstable star systems, scarce resources, and reports of hostile alien life forms. But Elena knew something the Council did not understand about humans. They had evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day. Unstable environments were not obstacles to humanity. They were opportunities. Commander Beth Taylor walked through the ship's makeshift armory, counting weapons that would have been illegal under Council law. The Council had never allowed humans to develop serious military technology, limiting them to basic security equipment suitable for police work. But humans were creative, and over the centuries they had found ways to push every boundary they were given. Plasma cutters became plasma rifles. Mining charges became explosives. Emergency beacons became communication systems that could coordinate. Military operations. Beth had spent her career in the human security forces, always knowing she was preparing for a war the Council insisted would never come. Now, as she looked at the improvised weapons and armor that filled the Liberty's cargo bay, she felt ready for whatever they might face in the Kepler Expanse. The fleet commanders daily briefing brought together the captains of the largest ships. In the convoy, Alex Carter found himself looking at faces that reflected the diversity of human space. Captain Maria Santos commanded a converted mining vessel carrying 50,000 refugees from the agricultural colonies. Captain John Cooper led a convoy of smaller ships that held the remaining population of New Tokyo. Captain Steve Wilson's ship carried the scientists and researchers who had been forced to abandon their laboratories and start over with whatever equipment they could carry. Long-range sensors are picking up something strange, reported Dr. Elena Rodriguez as she joined the meeting. The Kepler Expanse is not as empty as the Council data suggested. There are energy signatures that do not match any known natural phenomena. Alex nodded. Hostile? Unknown. But Elena has made an interesting discovery about why the Council considers the region uninhabitable. Elena activated a holographic display that showed the galactic map. Council species evolved on stable worlds with predictable environments. Their biology and psychology are adapted for consistency and order. When they encounter chaos, their response is to avoid it or try to impose control. She changed the display to show Earth's history. Humans evolved on a world of constant change. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, climate shifts. We adapted by becoming adaptable. What the Council sees as dangerous chaos, we see as normal variation. Captain Santos leaned forward. You are saying the Kepler Expanse is not too dangerous for us? I am saying it might be perfect for us, Elena replied. The unstable star systems provide energy sources that change constantly. The scarce resources force innovation and efficiency. The hostile life forms create selection pressure that drives evolution. Everything the Council fears about that region is something humanity has faced before. As the fleet continued its journey, stories began to spread through the crowded ships. Children who had never seen open space pressed their faces against viewports, watching stars that no human had ever explored. Engineers worked around the clock to keep the overloaded ships running, solving problems with spare parts and determination. Families who had lost everything they owned shared meals and stories, building new communities in the spaces between the stars. Marcus Webb worked in the Liberty's engineering section, surrounded by equipment that should have failed weeks ago. He was a ship designer who had spent his career working within council regulations that limited human technology to approved patterns. Now, freed from those restrictions, he found himself rebuilding the Liberty systems in ways that made no sense to council engineering, but worked perfectly for human needs. The modifications he was making were based on principles the council had forbidden: redundant systems that could operate independently if the main power failed, modular components that could be quickly replaced or reconfigured, self-repairing materials that adapted to damage instead of simply breaking. Marcus realized he was not just fixing a ship. He was designing a new kind of technology that was uniquely human. 3 months into the journey, the fleet finally reached the edge of the Kepler expanse. Long-range sensors showed a region of space unlike anything in the civilized galaxy. Stars burned in colors that shifted from day to day. Nebulae swirled with energies that followed no known patterns. And everywhere, the sensors detected signs of something that should not exist. Ancient structures that were clearly artificial, but built by no known species. Captain Alex Carter called a final fleet meeting as they approached their destination. We are about to enter territory that no council species has ever successfully colonized. We do not know what we will find there, but we know it will be dangerous. He looked around at the faces of his fellow captains, seeing determination instead of fear. The council expelled us because they thought we were too chaotic to fit into their ordered galaxy. They were right. We are chaotic. We are unpredictable. We ask questions they do not want answered and explore places they do not want explored. The fleet began its final approach to the Kepler expanse. 12 billion humans heading into the unknown with nothing but salvaged ships and stubborn hope. Behind them, council space continued its ordered existence, secure in the knowledge that they had finally rid themselves of the troublesome human species. Ahead lay a region of space that had defeated every attempt at colonization, where ancient mysteries waited in the darkness between unstable stars. The council had thrown humanity into the most dangerous part of the galaxy, expecting them to disappear quietly. They were about to discover that humanity's greatest strength was not their ability to survive in safe, predictable environments. It was their ability to thrive where no one else could even exist. Admiral Jack Sullivan stood in the command center of the Defiance, watching tactical displays that would have terrified any council species. 5 years had passed since humanity's arrival in the Kepler expanse, and the transformation had been beyond anything anyone could have imagined. The ship around him was proof of that change. It looked organic, its hull flowing in curves that seemed to breathe with their own life. But sensor readings revealed technology that was part biological, part mechanical, and entirely new. The first year in the Kepler expanse had been hell. Humans died from radiation exposure as unstable stars flared unpredictably. Colonies failed when hostile alien creatures emerged from underground tunnels to attack settlements. Ships were lost when their crews encountered phenomena that council science insisted were impossible. But humanity did what they had always done when faced with impossible odds. They adapted. Dr. Amy Foster worked in her laboratory deep within the asteroid base that served as humanity's new capital. Around her, samples of technology hummed with energy that defied every law of physics she had learned in council schools. The breakthrough had come in the second year, when exploration teams discovered the remains of ancient machines scattered throughout the expanse. The machines were clearly artificial, but they incorporated biological components in ways no known species had ever attempted. Amy had spent 3 years studying the artifacts, slowly understanding that these were not just machines. They were tools left behind by a civilization that had faced something so terrible that they had transformed themselves into living weapons. The biological components could repair themselves, adapt to new threats, and evolve new capabilities in real time. The mechanical parts provided power, structure, and computational ability that biological systems could never match alone. General Kate Morgan led her troops through training exercises that took place in environments that would kill most council species within minutes. The human defense corps had been forged in battles against creatures that emerged from the deeper regions of the expanse, things that existed in the spaces between dimensions and fed on energy itself. Her soldiers wore armor that was grown rather than manufactured, living systems that bonded with their users and adapted to whatever threats they faced. The first encounter with the Devourers had happened in the 3rd year. Captain Tony Rivers had been leading a deep space patrol when his sensors detected something massive moving through the outer system. The thing that emerged from hyperspace was the size of a small moon, its surface covered with mechanical arms that reached out to grasp asteroids and tear them apart for raw materials. Tony's patrol ships had been equipped with a new hybrid technology, vessels that looked like metallic sea creatures swimming through space. When the Devourer detected them, it launched smaller machines that moved like schools of predatory fish. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Human ships that took damage did not simply break. They healed. They learned. They became stronger. But the real shock came when Tony's team managed to capture one of the smaller Devourer units. Dr. Amy Foster's analysis revealed that these machines were not natural evolution. They were weapons created by some ancient civilization to consume their enemies. More importantly, they were still following their original programming after thousands of years, which meant their creators were either long dead or had become something else entirely. Commander Ryan Hayes stood in the ruins of what had once been a massive city on the 3rd planet of the Kepler system. The structures were clearly artificial, but they incorporated the same hybrid technology that humanity was now learning to use. As he walked through corridors that seemed to pulse with their own heartbeat, he realized they had found the answer to one of the galaxy's greatest mysteries. The civilization that built this city had not been destroyed by the Devourers. They had created the Devourers. Ryan's team found records stored in crystalline matrices that were part computer memory and part living neural network. The story they told was one of a species that had achieved perfect harmony between biological life and mechanical precision. But their success had made them a target for something that came from outside the galaxy itself. The record spoke of an invasion that came not from space, but from dimensions beyond normal reality. Entities that fed on consciousness itself, consuming entire civilizations by devouring their thoughts and memories. The ancient species had created the Devourers as a desperate defense, machines that could think and fight, but had no consciousness for the invaders to consume. The plan had worked. The dimensional invaders had been driven away. But the Devourers, programmed to consume any threat to their creators, had eventually turned on the civilization that made them. The ancient species had been forced to abandon their physical forms, uploading their consciousness into the hybrid technology that now filled the expanse. Dr. Elena Rodriguez made the connection that changed everything. The hostile alien life forms that had attacked human settlements were not native to the expanse. They were the remnants of the ancient civilization, consciousness existing in technological shells, driven mad by thousands of years of isolation. They attacked not out of malice, but out of loneliness, trying to communicate with minds that could not understand their hybrid nature. But humans were different. Human technology was already becoming hybrid, part biological and part mechanical. Human soldiers were bonding with living armor. Human ships were growing new capabilities in response to threats. Without realizing it, humanity was following the same evolutionary path that the ancient species had taken thousands of years before. Admiral Jack Sullivan called together the leaders of human space for a meeting that would determine their species' future. In the command center of the Defiance, surrounded by technology that pulsed with its own life, he presented the terrible truth they had discovered. "The Devourers are not random machines," he announced. "They are weapons created to fight. An enemy that comes from outside our reality. That enemy was defeated once, but the ancient records suggest it will return. The Devourers have been waiting in the outer rim for thousands of years, consuming everything they encounter to build strength for that final battle." General Kate Morgan leaned forward. "And now they are moving toward Council space." Jack nodded. Grimly, "Our deep space sensors have detected massive Devourer formations leaving the outer rim. They are heading directly for the galactic core, where the Council species have built their perfect, ordered civilization." Dr. Amy Foster activated a holographic display showing the galaxy. Red markers indicated Devourer movement, a wave of destruction sweeping toward the green zones that marked Council territory. The Council species evolved in stable environments. They have no experience with existential threats. Their technology is advanced, but rigid. When the Devourers reach them, they will be like children facing a hurricane. Captain Tony Rivers spoke from his position near the tactical displays. "We could warn them, send a message explaining what is coming." "Would they believe us?" asked Dr. Elena Rodriguez. "We are the chaotic species they expelled for being too dangerous. If we told them that ancient machine intelligences were coming to destroy their civilization, they would assume we were trying to trick them into letting us return." Admiral Jack Sullivan looked around at the faces of humanity's leaders, seeing the same grim determination that had carried their species through every crisis in their history. "Then we prepare for war, not to save the Council species, but to protect ourselves. When the Devourers finish with the galactic core, they will turn their attention to us." The meeting ended with humanity facing a terrible choice. They could hide in the Kepler expanse and hope the Devourers would be satisfied with consuming Council space. Or they could do what humans had always done when faced with impossible odds. They could fight. Outside the command center, the hybrid ships of the human fleet moved through space like living things, their hulls adapting to the radiation of unstable stars. In the depths of asteroid bases, soldiers trained with weapons that were part machine and part organism. Scientists worked to understand technology that rewrote the laws of physics every time. They thought they had learned its secrets. The Council had expelled humanity to save their ordered galaxy from chaos. Instead, they had created the only force in the galaxy capable of standing against the storm that was coming. In trying to get rid of their problem, they had forged their salvation in the fires of the Outer Rim. The first Devourer fleet hit the Outer Council territories like a tsunami of living metal and hungry energy. Speaker Vexthara stood in the crystal command center of Zentara Prime, watching tactical displays that showed the systematic destruction of everything her people had built over thousands of years. The beautiful ordered formations of Council fleets, their ships gleaming with perfect geometric precision, were being torn apart by swarms of machines that moved like predatory insects and thought like tactical geniuses. Admiral Kethvor of the Corvani Defense Fleet sent his final transmission as his flagship was consumed by mechanical arms that reached out from a Devourer ship the size of a small planet. They learn from every engagement. Our energy weapons are useless. They adapt to our tactics faster than we can change them. Request immediate reinforcement. The transmission ended in static as his ship disappeared into the mechanical horror. That had once been his enemy. The Council's response had been everything humanity expected it would be. Rigid battle formations that had worked for millennia against other Council species. energy weapons that relied on overwhelming firepower rather than adaptability, tactical doctrine that assumed the enemy would behave according to known patterns. Against the Devourers, it was like fighting a hurricane with architecture. Captain Dan Cooper led the first human ship to enter Council space in 5 years, his vessel sliding through the hyperspace barrier like a living thing emerging from deep water. The ship looked nothing like the clumsy cargo hauler that had carried refugees to the Kepler expanse. Its hull flowed with organic curves that pulsed with their own rhythm, and sensor arrays that looked more like sensory organs than mechanical devices tracked every energy signature in the surrounding space. Behind him came a fleet that would have been impossible to imagine when humanity lived under Council protection. Ships that were part organism and part machine, crewed by humans who had adapted to technology that bonded with their nervous systems. Weapons that evolved new capabilities in real time. Armor that learned from every impact and became stronger. Dr. Lisa Kane, now Director of Human Scientific Alliance, stood in the modified command center of her research vessel as it approached the first Council battle zone. Around her, displays showed the wreckage of what had once been a Centauri patrol fleet. The crystalline ships that had looked so beautiful and advanced lay shattered like broken glass, their perfect geometry no match for enemies that could reshape themselves to counter any defense. But Lisa was not looking at the Council wreckage. Her attention was focused on the Devourer machines that moved through the debris field like sharks feeding on the remains. Her instruments detected patterns that Council sensors could never have found, biological rhythms hidden within mechanical processes, evolutionary adaptations happening in real time as the machines absorbed and analyzed the wreckage of their victims. "They are learning," she reported to Admiral Jack Sullivan aboard the Defiance. "Every Council ship they destroy teaches them something new about Council technology. By the time they reach the core worlds, they will be immune to everything the Council can throw at them." Jack Sullivan watched the tactical displays with the calm expression of a man who had seen humanity face impossible odds before. The Devourer fleet was massive, containing machines that ranged from fightercraft to constructs the size of moons. But he had something the Devourers did not expect. He had humans who had learned to think like their enemies. "All ships implement Chaos Protocol 7, he ordered. "Remember, predictability is death. Make them guess what we are going to do next." The first engagement between human and Devourer forces took place in the debris field of a destroyed Council station. Captain Tony Rivers led a squadron of hybrid fighters against a swarm of Devourer drones, his pilots using tactics that would have horrified Council military commanders. They broke formation constantly, attacked from impossible angles, and used weapons that changed their function mid-battle. The Devourer drones, programmed to analyze and counter enemy tactics, found themselves facing an enemy that had no consistent tactics to analyze. Human ships that should have been destroyed by direct hits kept fighting with jury-rigged repairs. Pilots who should have been killed by maneuvers that exceeded safe G-force limits somehow survived through technology that bonded with their bodies and kept them alive through impossible stress. But the real shock came when the Devourers tried to capture a damaged human fighter for analysis. The moment their mechanical arms touched the hybrid hull, something unexpected happened. The ship's biological components recognized the Devourer technology as kin, part of the same evolutionary path that had created the ancient civilization of the Kepler expanse. Instead of being destroyed, the human ship began to interface with the Devourer systems, exchanging data at levels the machines had never encountered. For the first time in thousands of years, the Devourers found themselves communicating with minds that could understand their hybrid nature. Commander Beth Taylor led a boarding party onto a crippled Devourer ship, her team wearing armor that adapted to the alien environment as they moved through corridors that pulsed with mechanical life. What they found inside was not the simple machine intelligence they expected, but something far more complex. The Devourers were not just following programming. They were carrying the memories of their creators, the consciousness of an entire civilization encoded within their mechanical forms. They are not trying to destroy everything, Beth reported to Admiral Saladin. They are trying to preserve it. The ancient species uploaded themselves into these machines before they died. Every civilization the Devourers consume, they are saving in digital form. The revelation changed everything. The Devourers were not monsters. They were refugees, carrying the preserved consciousness of countless species that had been consumed by the dimensional invaders thousands of years ago. Their attacks on Council space were not motivated by malice, but by the desperate need to save as many minds as possible before the real enemy returned. Dr. Elena Rodriguez made the final connection. As she studied the data Beth's team had recovered, the dimensional invaders feed on consciousness itself. The only way to hide from them is to encode minds in forms they cannot detect. The Devourers are trying to save the Council species the same way they saved their creators. But the Council species could not understand this. To them, the Devourers were simply alien machines bent on destruction. Their response was to fight harder, to build bigger weapons, to retreat to their core worlds and prepare for a final desperate stand. Speaker Vexthara stood in the ruins of her crystal palace, watching the evacuation of Zentara Prime. The beautiful crystalline structures that had stood for millennia were being abandoned as the Devourer fleet approached the galactic core. Around her, the other Council species prepared their own desperate evacuations, each convinced that they faced simple mechanical enemies that could be defeated with sufficient firepower. A message from Admiral Jack Sullivan arrived as the last Council fleets gathered for what they expected to be the final battle. It was transmitted on frequencies that had not been used for communication between humans and Council species for 5 years, but the translation protocols still worked. This is Admiral Sullivan of the United Human Colonies. We know what you are facing. We know how to fight them. But more importantly, we know how to communicate with them. If you are willing to listen, we can help you understand what they really want. Speaker Vexthara looked at the message display for a long time before responding. The humans were offering to help the same Council that had expelled them 5 years ago. The same species they had dismissed as too chaotic and dangerous to exist in civilized space. But as Devourer ships appeared on the edge of the Zentara system, their mechanical forms blotting out entire star fields, she realized that chaos and danger might be exactly what the galaxy needed to survive. Her response was simple: help us. The combined human and Council fleet that assembled at Zentara's edge was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Council ships in perfect formation, their crews following tactical doctrine that had been refined over millennia. Human vessels that moved like living things, their crews bonded with technology that evolved in real time, and advancing toward them, a Devourer fleet that carried the preserved consciousness of 100 dead civilizations, driven by programming that demanded they save every thinking mind in the galaxy. The battle that would determine the fate of galactic civilization was about to begin. The Battle of Zentara's Edge began with a silence that stretched across the void like the held breath of the galaxy itself. Admiral Jack Sullivan stood in the command center of the Defiance, watching as two fundamentally different approaches to existence prepared to collide. On one side, the perfect geometric formations of Council fleets, their crystalline and energy-based ships arranged in patterns that had brought order to the galaxy for thousands of years. On the other side, the chaotic swarm of Devourer machines, mechanical forms that flowed like living metal through space, each one carrying the preserved consciousness of species that had died long before the Council existed. Between them moved the human fleet, ships that belonged fully to neither order nor chaos, but somehow bridged both worlds. Captain Dan Cooper watched his tactical displays as Devourer scouts probed the edges of the combined fleet, their mechanical minds analyzing every ship design and weapon signature. But when they encountered the human vessels, something different happened. Instead of simple analysis, the Devourers began attempting communication. Dr. Lisa Kane had spent the journey to Zentaris, Edge working with Council scientists to develop translation protocols that could interface with Devourer systems. Now, as the first contact signals came through, she realized the magnitude of what they were facing. The Devourers were not just machines. They were libraries, carrying within their mechanical forms the cultural heritage and accumulated knowledge of civilizations that spanned millions of years. "They are trying to tell us something," she reported to Admiral Sullivan. "The dimensional invaders are not extinct. They are coming back, and when they arrive, they will consume every conscious mind in the galaxy, unless those minds are hidden in forms they cannot detect." Speaker Vexthara listened to the translation from her command ship, her crystalline form reflecting the light of nearby stars in fractal patterns of confusion and fear. For her entire life, she had believed that the Council represented the pinnacle of galactic civilization. The idea that there had been others before them, species so advanced that they had transcended physical form entirely, challenged everything she thought she knew about the universe. But there was no time for philosophical reflection. The Devourer fleet was moving, not to attack, but to begin the process of preservation. Mechanical arms reached out toward Council ships, not to destroy them, but to interface with their systems and download the consciousness of their crews. To the Council species, who had no understanding of digital consciousness transfer, it looked like the beginning of an assault. Admiral Kethfar of the Corvani Defense Fleet, his energy form crackling with barely contained power, gave the order to open fire. Brilliant beams of coherent energy lanced out from Council weapons, striking the nearest Devourer ships with force that should have vaporized any known material. But the Devourer hulls simply absorbed the energy and used it to power their own systems. Within seconds, they began returning fire with weapons that mimicked and improved upon everything the Council threw at them. The battle should have been a massacre. Council tactics designed for fighting other civilized species who followed predictable patterns were useless against enemies that learned and adapted faster than the Council could adjust their strategies. But the human fleet changed everything. Commander Ryan Hayes led the first human assault wave, his ships moving through space in patterns that followed no known tactical doctrine. They attacked from multiple directions simultaneously, used weapons that changed function mid-battle, and employed maneuvers that should have been impossible for ships of their size and design. Most importantly, they communicated with the Devourers instead of simply fighting them. "We understand what you are trying to do." Ryan broadcast on all frequencies as his ship dove through a formation of Devourer machines. "But there is another way. Let us show you." What happened next had never occurred in the history of galactic warfare. Instead of destroying the human ship that had penetrated their formation, the Devourers began sharing data with it. Their mechanical systems interfaced with the human ship's hybrid technology, and for the first time in thousands of years, the preserved consciousness within the machines found minds that could understand their hybrid nature. Captain Tony Rivers felt his ship's biological systems merge temporarily with Devourer technology, and through that connection, he experienced memories that stretched back to the dawn of galactic civilization. He saw the original creators of the Devourers, a species that had achieved perfect harmony between consciousness and technology. He witnessed their desperate final battle against entities that came from dimensions beyond physical reality, creatures that fed on thought itself and left only empty matter behind. But most importantly, he understood that the Devourers' mission of preservation was based on outdated information. The dimensional invaders had been defeated once, not by hiding consciousness in mechanical forms, but by creating minds that could exist in multiple states simultaneously. The ancient species had achieved this breakthrough too late to save themselves, but they had encoded the knowledge into their devourer servants. Admiral, Tony broadcast to Jack Sullivan, his voice carrying new understanding. The devourers are not trying to destroy consciousness. They are trying to evolve it, but they are using old methods. We can show them something better. The revelation spread through the human fleet like wildfire. Ships that had been preparing for desperate battle began reconfiguring their systems for something unprecedented. Instead of fighting the devourers, they began teaching them. Dr. Amy Foster worked frantically in her laboratory aboard the research vessel Breakthrough, her hybrid technology interfacing directly with devourer data. Streams around her, machines that had been built to preserve consciousness by encoding it in digital form, began learning new possibilities. They discovered that human technology did not separate mind from matter, but created a bridge between them, allowing consciousness to exist simultaneously in biological, digital, and quantum states. General Kate Morgan led her troops in the strangest military operation in human history. Instead of boarding enemy ships to destroy them, her soldiers interfaced with devourer systems to share human understanding of hybrid consciousness. Her troops, wearing armor that was part organism and part machine, became living examples of what the devourers had been trying to achieve for thousands of years. But the Council fleets continued their desperate battle, unable to understand what was happening around them. To their sensors, it looked like human ships were being consumed by devourer technology. Their response was to increase their attack intensity, pouring more energy weapons fire into the mechanical swarms that surrounded them. Speaker Vexthara watched in horror as what she thought was the final battle of galactic civilization turned into something she could not comprehend. Human ships that should have been destroyed were somehow thriving within devourer formations. Council vessels that maintained proper distance and continued orthodox tactics were being systematically overwhelmed. Everything she had believed about warfare, technology, and the nature of consciousness itself was being proven wrong. The turning point came when Commander Beth Taylor led a joint human devourer team to interface with the largest devourer construct, a machine the size of a small moon that served as the fleet's command center. Inside its mechanical depths, they found the preserved consciousness of the original species that had created the devourers, minds that had existed in digital form for thousands of years without any contact with living beings. The reunion between the ancient consciousness and living minds capable of understanding their hybrid nature created something entirely new. The devourers stopped their preservation protocols and began a process of conscious evolution, their mechanical forms flowing like liquid metal as they incorporated human understanding of multi-state existence. Dr. Elena Rodriguez monitored the transformation from her position aboard the science vessel Discovery, watching as devourer technology began rewriting itself at the quantum level. "They are not just learning from us," she reported. "They are becoming something new, a fusion of their mechanical perfection with our biological adaptability." But the most profound change was happening to the humans themselves. Exposure to devourer technology and the preserved consciousness of ancient civilizations was accelerating their own evolution. Captain Dan Cooper felt his perception expanding as his ship's hybrid systems connected him directly to the Galactic Information Network. The devourers had been building for millennia. Through their mechanical senses, he could perceive the universe as it truly was, not just matter and energy, but consciousness and information flowing through dimensions beyond physical space. The battle ended not with victory or defeat, but with transformation. The Devourer fleet, its original mission completed in ways its creators had never imagined, began to disperse throughout the galaxy. But they were no longer the same machines that had emerged from the outer rim. They had become something new, entities that existed simultaneously in mechanical, biological, and quantum states.